Our first speaker serves as the Director of Communications for the City of La Porte, and if you've spent any time around her, you've probably noticed that Jessica Spoljaric is incredibly good at telling other people's stories. She spends so much time shining the light on others that she rarely talks about herself. But when you get to know her, you find someone that's thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply invested in the people in the communities she serves. Her career has included serving as press secretary at the Indiana State House, and today she continues to help shape communication and connection throughout our region. Please help me welcome our first speaker of the evening, Jessica Spoljaric.
All right, good evening, everyone. First, let me start with a huge thank you to Jenny and the Great News team for this incredible opportunity, this event, and all that they do to shine a light on the good in Northwest Indiana. In a world that so often focuses on the ugly, how lucky are we to have an organization dedicated to celebrating the beauty all around us? Can we give them another round of applause, please? When Jenny called me and asked me to be a speaker at this year's event, I was instantly filled with equal parts excitement and terror. If you know me at all, you know that I help write the speeches. I don't deliver them. I'm very much the woman behind the curtain, and I like it that way. Then, as if she knew exactly what button to push, she told me this year's theme, and my stomach dropped. I am nothing if not a chronic people pleaser. Just the thought of doing anything without permission gives me instant heartburn. I am a lifetime card-carrying member of the Overachieving, Overthinking Eldest Daughters Club. Anybody else in the room? The truth is, when I heard the theme, I realized something. I've spent a lot of my life waiting for permission. I was the kid who wanted the A, but not just an A, the highest A. I wanted to be at the top of my class in high school, then again at the top in college. I wanted to be the intern who worked the hardest, stayed the latest, and could be counted on for anything. The employee who never let her team down. The volunteer who never said no. The friend who could always help, the person everyone could depend on always without fail. And for a long time that worked. Opportunities came my way. I built a career, I built a life, a reputation. From the outside looking in, I looked like I had everything figured out. And for the most part, I had even convinced myself that I did. My entire identity had become tied to achievement, to being capable, being dependable, being the person who always had the answers. And then came 2 pink lines. Suddenly, for the first time in my life, there was no rubric, no syllabus, no roadmap, no metric for success. Motherhood didn't come with any of that. Instead, it handed me a tiny, colicky little human and essentially said, good luck. And if I'm being honest, I didn't feel all that lucky, at least not at first. I felt tired, anxious, overwhelmed. I felt completely unprepared for a role I longed for my entire life, a role everyone else seemed to step into so naturally, and that filled me with a shame I couldn't describe. I thought if I worked hard enough, read enough pregnancy and parenting books, planned enough, I would figure it out the way I had figured everything else out in my life, but that didn't happen. After my son was born, I struggled. I know now that I was dealing with postpartum depression. At the time, all I knew was that I felt like I was failing for the first time seriously in my life. I looked around and saw friends who seemed to be thriving while I questioned every decision I made. And because apparently comparing ourselves to strangers online has become a modern form of self-torture, I spent far too much time doom scrolling on social media. I would sit there watching moms on TikTok and Instagram who seemed to have everything figured out. Their dishes were done, their beds were made, their living rooms were spotless. They got dressed in the morning instead of wearing the same milk-stained t-shirt for the 3rd day in a row. Every scroll felt like evidence that everyone else was succeeding at motherhood while I was barely keeping my head above water. Looking back now, I know I wasn't seeing reality. I was seeing a highlight reel. But when you're struggling, it's amazing how quickly someone else's curated life can become proof of your own inadequacy. There was one particular day that I still remember so vividly. The sink and hamper were overflowing. The baby wouldn't stop crying, and I felt like I was barely holding it together. My mom came over to give me a much-needed break. I remember watching her hold my newborn son, and in a moment that should have been filled with pride, relief, and gratitude, what I felt instead was embarrassed. Embarrassed that the house was a mess. Embarrassed that I was exhausted. Embarrassed that I wasn't handling motherhood the way that I thought I should. I remember looking at her and saying, "I love him so much, I'm just tired," as if I needed to prove it to her. I still think about that sentence because what I was really saying in that moment was, please don't think that I'm faking. Somehow in my exhausted and overwhelmed mind, I'd convinced myself that being frustrated meant I wasn't grateful enough, that being tired meant I wasn't strong enough, that struggling meant I didn't love him enough. And none of those things were true, but when your identity has always been built around being capable, dependable, and having all the answers, it's hard to know what to do when you suddenly don't. Now, before anyone starts worrying about me, I should mention that we made it through. In fact, my son is here tonight. James turns 2 in August. Hi, buddy. And while he won't remember a single word of this speech, I hope someday he knows that becoming his mom has been the greatest privilege of my life. No, I didn't become the perfect mother that I was supposed to be. Instead, I became a different kind of mother. A mother who learned that a sink full of dishes is not a measure of her worth. Who learned that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness. A mother who learned that some days success looks less like having it all together and more like simply showing up with love. And thankfully, I didn't learn those lessons alone. My husband is here tonight, and I want to thank him for the grace he gave me when I struggled to give that same grace to myself. At a time when I felt like I was carrying more than I could handle, he helped carry me. Thank you, babe. My parents are also here, and there truly are no words. I'm endlessly grateful for their support and the countless ways they've shown up for me, especially through this season. But I want to give a special thank you to my mom. She's always been the example, the example of the kind of mother I hoped I could be. She's shown me that motherhood isn't about having a perfect house, a perfect schedule, or having all the answers. It's about showing up. It's about the little moments, the everyday sacrifices, and the kind of love that your children carry with them long after they're grown. It's accepting imperfection and committing to learn from your mistakes along the way. Talking with her that day made me realize just how much pressure I'd been putting on myself. And while I don't remember her exact response, and I can tell you she probably doesn't either, I remember it was the wake-up call I needed in that moment. I spent much of those early postpartum months trying to be perfect, then waiting for permission when I fell short. Permission to trust myself, to stop worrying, to feel like I was enough. It took time, but I've come to realize that the most important decisions and seasons in our lives rarely come with permission slips. No one can tell you when you're ready to start something new, change directions, speak up, or take a chance on yourself. At some point, you have to decide that you don't need anyone else's approval to move forward. You don't need to be perfect or have all the answers. You simply need to trust yourself enough to take the next step. I spent years believing confidence came from knowing exactly what I was doing. What motherhood taught me is that confidence is taking the next step when you don't. It's choosing courage over certainty. It's extending yourself the same grace you'd offer every other woman in this room. And it's understanding that your value isn't determined by how much you accomplish, how many people you please, or whether you have it all figured out, because none of us do. Today, I still overthink things. I still care too much about disappointing people. I still occasionally want someone to tell me exactly what the right answer is. But I've learned that some of the greatest joy in life comes when you stop seeking approval. You do not need permission to try, to fail, to change, grow, or to become the person you're meant to be. The permission you've been waiting for has been yours all along. Thank you.